or have another print disability which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Laura, and for the next hour, I will be reading from the July 19th issue of the New York Times Style section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Super Agent? Obviously. Secret Weapon in 2028? Maybe. Ari Emanuel's empire has grown beyond Hollywood to include the UFC, WWE, and some key features in the manosphere. That could work out well for his brother Rahm Emanuel. By Andrew Zucker. As a top Hollywood super agent, Ari Emanuel spent decades amassing a client list chock full of silver screen icons. These days, his sprawling sports and entertainment empire has brought him closer to podcasters, peptide takers, and protein maxers, who occupy a significant mindshare of some of America's most valuable and persuadable voters, independent young men. Emanuel's clients and colleagues include the UFC ringleader Dana White, the podcaster and UFC commentator Joe Rogan, the sports talking head Pat McAfee, and the sports and political pundit Stephen A. Smith. Emanuel also maintains a close relationship with Elon Musk, even attending the SpaceX founder's court battle against OpenAI this year. The Emanuel sphere is vast, and come 2028, it could prove particularly beneficial to one potential presidential candidate, Ari's brother Rahm. Rahm Emanuel is not currently a candidate for office, of course, and there is no guarantee he will be. But the former White House Chief of Staff, Member of Congress, U.S. Ambassador to Japan, and Mayor of Chicago is having a very maybe he's running for president summer. In June, he biked dozens of miles across New Hampshire and held town halls in the early voting state. In July, he popped up in Tel Aviv, delivering a critical speech about Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And he has given interviews and Sunday news shows analysis on events in Iran. He's fitting in family time, too. Right after his trek around the Granite State, he headed to the Big Apple to catch a glimpse of the New York Knicks in the NBA Finals. There, sitting near the San Antonio Spurs bench in the first row, were the Emanuel brothers. Only 16 months apart, the fiery siblings are known to be exceptionally close. They are also close to their eldest brother, Ezekiel Emanuel, a prominent physician. We have conversations without verbs, adjectives, or pronouns, Rahm Emanuel once told an interviewer. There is no guarantee that Ari Emanuel would tip anything in the direction of his brother if he does in fact run for president, which, of course, he has not said he is. Plus, multiple likely Democratic candidates have existing ties to podcasters and influencers, and the bro vote could stay largely in the Republican camp. But with plenty of 2028 hopefuls jockeying for cultural cachet, names in Ari Emanuel's blue checkmark-filled network will be in high demand. There are people now whose job is to simply connect lawmakers to independent media creators, said Rebecca Sinais, a podcast producer and host. I think Ari has a whole different stratosphere of gatekeeping than somebody working for the Democrats. The membership of the Emanuel sphere would hardly be mistaken for MS Now's primetime lineup, though WME, Ari Emanuel's talent agency, represents some of those hosts too. And pressuring voices who pride themselves on their independence to rally around Rahm Emanuel would be a difficult task, even for a hard-charging Hollywood super agent. Some personalities in Ari Emanuel's orbit seem open to politicians of all flavors. Rogan endorsed Donald Trump on the eve of the 2024 election, But in 2019, he featured Bernie Sanders on his show and said he would likely vote for him the following year. Smith routinely bashes and praises figures on both sides of the aisle. McAfee largely avoids politics and declined to interview both Kamala Harris and Trump in 2024. He interviewed the president the following year. Moving the needle would not require full-blown endorsements from these personalities. Because of the large field of Democrats exploring campaigns, just appearing on certain shows could transform a candidate's fortunes. Scott Galloway, a podcaster and business school professor, pointed to Trump's decision to appear on Rogan's podcast less than 2 weeks out from the 2024 election. Vice President Harris would have had to have gone on MSNBC, CNN, and Fox for 3 hours a night for 2 weeks to match the same exposure, said Galloway, who is a WME client. There is also the Emanuel Sphere's potential fundraising reach. Ari Emanuel, who reportedly crossed the billionaire threshold last year, is a well-heeled donor in his own right. In the recent cycle, he's given to national Democrats, state parties, and individual candidates, including Hakeem Jeffries and Sherrod Brown. Then there are his friends. Ari Emanuel's relationship with the richest man on earth, Musk attended his wedding in 2022 and served on the board of his media conglomerate Endeavor for around a year, could prove useful to his brother. That is, if Musk is somehow willing to spend on a Democrat or tilt the X algorithm in his favor. Musk, who has supported Democrats in the past, contributed more than $250 million toward Trump efforts in 2024. He probably didn't decide the election, but he influenced it, Galloway said, of Musk's giving during the last presidential cycle. He could take 1% of his net worth, which is $10 billion, and likely decide the next election. Beyond the Musk friendship, another key asset in the Emanuel sphere is the wrestling behemoth WWE, which is owned by TKO Group, of which Ari Emanuel is chief executive and executive chairman. Although WWE's top content now resides on Netflix, the streaming company does not control its creative output. And over the past few decades, politics and wrestling have become more closely intertwined. On the night before the 2008 Pennsylvania primary, then candidates Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, and John McCain all appeared on Monday Night Raw. The WWE sent wrestlers to party conventions later that year as part of a voter registration drive. In 2024, Hulk Hogan tore his tank top at the Republican National Convention. In June, Trump hosted the UFC, which is also owned by TKO Group, on the White House lawn as fighters bloodied each other's faces in the octagon. Trump and Ari Emanuel exchanged a handshake before the fights commenced. Whatever Ari Emanuel decides to do in 2028 will have to be balanced with his relationship with Trump. He represented the president during part of his run on The Apprentice, and TKO Group has lobbied politicians in Washington to back a measure which would allow the company to run its own UFC-like boxing circuit. If Ari Emanuel is going to go all in for his brother, or anyone, in the Democratic Party, he may have to smooth things out with one influential left-leaning podcast. Before the UFC event in the nation's capital, Jon Favreau, a host of the popular politics podcast Pod Save America, told his listeners that he had received an invite to the festivities from the Mixed Martial Arts League's parent company, with Ari Emanuel personally copied on the email. Though initially confused by the invitation, Favreau confirmed his attendance and booked a hotel room. Ari chose me because what I thought is he thinks I was the other Jon Favreau, the podcaster said, referring to the Iron Man director. In June, he heard from the organizer that they had allotted too many tickets and that he would no longer be able to attend. "We would love to host you at a future event," the email read. Welcome to West Village. The is not optional, say some New Yorkers. Some newcomers in the city say they are meeting in Bronx or living in East Village. By Alicia Haradasani Gupta and Gabriella Gershenson. Over the last few years, Nikki Shapiro, a New York City walking tour guide, has noticed what he calls a disease spreading through Lower Manhattan, particularly among newcomers in the city. They were dropping the crucial "the" before certain neighborhood names. The East Village was suddenly just East Village, for example. Same for the West Village. It became noticeable enough that Shapiro posted a video on TikTok this summer urging people to hold on to their articles. The inciting incident for that video was that a few months ago, I was with a friend who is a cantankerous born and raised New Yorker, and we were speaking to a young woman who said, "Let's go to West Village," Shapiro said in an interview. And he kind of snapped back, the. The video seemed to have tapped into a hot debate, drawing hundreds of commenters, most of them agreeing with Shapiro and commiserating with one another about all the other neighborhoods whose definite articles had fallen victim. Some are now going to Bronx instead of the Bronx, or meeting on UES for the Upper East Side, which is, as one user put it, more or less a crime. Online, neighborhood guides advertise the perfect day in West Village. A recent email subject line from Spotify alerted Jay-Z fans to available tickets at Yankee Stadium. "Jay-Z in Bronx," it read. Spotify didn't respond to requests for clarification on whether that was a typo or an intentional omission. Neighborhood nomenclature is such an integral part of New York's lore that it becomes something like a personality trait for its residents. Neighborhoods are proudly named in everything from the musical Rent and the TV series Gossip Girl to Jennifer Lopez's Jenny from the Block and Jay-Z's Empire State of Mind. It is hardly a surprise, then, that any perceptible shift in the city's mores, even the omission of a three-letter article, would divide its inhabitants, pitting the new versus the classic, the young versus the old. For some, using fewer words is about efficient communication. Charlotte, a 16-year-old New Yorker strolling through the financial district, noticed that her friends had recently been dropping the article. "Most of the time it's just like, 'Meet me at West Village,' because we already know where we're going," she said. "We don't have to say unnecessary things." "And the is unnecessary?" replied her twin sister Jade. "I think there's a lot of abbreviations too. Maybe people have just gotten lazy," she added. The omission could also be less a statement and more a mistake born out of confusion, Shapiro added. Two New York Times journalists on a recent walk through the East and West Villages did not happen upon signage, bus stops, or maps that carried neighborhood names with the articles included, which is part of a long-standing space-saving convention of dropping articles from signs all across the city. Even uptown neighbors, often perceived as more conservative and less susceptible to the whims of young trend cycles, are seemingly not immune. Joelle Opsatz, a co-owner of Butterfield Market, a specialty grocer with 2 locations on the Upper East Side, has been noticing an omission of the neighborhood's article among younger customers in her store for the last few years. "I corrected in my mind," said Opsatz, who has lived in the neighborhood her whole life. For others, including the is a matter of grammatical importance. In theory, an article usually precedes a particular singular noun or an adjective that is describing that noun. "It sounds stupid to me to say, 'I'm going to East Village,'" said Rana Good, 41, a travel journalist who has lived in the city for 2 decades. "Maybe it's because I generally care more about words than the average person," Good said. "But I feel people aren't as conscientious of how they word things and write things anymore. Good has also posted a video about this debate on TikTok, drawing hundreds of comments with users swearing their allegiance to one side or the other. Was it the West and East Village, she asked? But that question opened up another point of contention, as some commenters suggested it was simply the village, which usually refers to Greenwich Village. Previous generations seemed to count fewer neighborhoods, said Jake Dell, 39, the fifth-generation owner of Katz's Delicatessen, which has been in business on East Houston Street since 1888. He has a deep history with the area adjacent to the East Village that he always called the Lower East Side. About 10 years ago, he started hearing people abbreviate the name to the LES. At first, I didn't know what the hell people were talking about, he said. Down the street at Russ and Daughters, the 112-year-old smoked fish emporium, John Russ Tupper, 51, a fourth-generation owner, said he hasn't yet encountered the new vernacular. Going to LES, he mused? Ugh, that sounds wrong to me. The shift may just be a part of a long history in the city's neighborhoods of rebranding and adapting to waves of people moving in. Often the changes have come from real estate agents looking to market a neighborhood, said Harold Holzer, Manhattan's borough historian and an Abraham Lincoln scholar. Some of them, like Bococa, are less successful than others, as you can tell by how hard it was to pronounce. At any given moment, the city's neighborhood names represent an inconsistent, crazy quilt, he said. The Bronx, for example, carries an article because of the Bronx River, which itself is named after a European settler named Jonas Bronk, he explained. But Harlem, which is also hugged by a titular river, is divorced from any articles and is named after a city in the Netherlands. I mean, what is Tribeca? He added. What is Dumbo? They're invented names. For years, real estate agents tried to rebrand the once grimy and colorful Hell's Kitchen neighborhood into the more quaint-sounding Clinton, Holzer said, to middling success. Another example is in North Brooklyn, where there is a debate over boundaries of Williamsburg, Greenpoint, Bushwick, and the newish term East Williamsburg. My younger daughter lives in Gowanus, but she lives close enough to Park Slope that they're calling it Parkwanus, Holzer added. It sounds like a creature in a lagoon. Katie McClure, the manager of the Locavore Variety Store, which stocks an assortment of locally made items, is familiar with nomenclature in flux. The shop on 6th Avenue, near West 10th Street, is in a location that one could call the village, Greenwich Village, the West Village, or just downtown. Like, what neighborhood do we actually fall into, she said. But when it comes to the preferred name, the expert in New York made wares conceded to the old guard. Well, I'm not a native New Yorker. I've been here for almost 10 years, she said. But I think I would say the West Village. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times Style section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Mom, Dad, I want to be a welder. Gen Z is increasingly turning to trade schools in hopes of future-proofing their careers against AI. But getting their parents and peers on board can be a challenge. By Callie Holterman. At the edge of a parking lot in the Arkansas Delta, LaDonna Glass slipped off her work boots and exchanged them for a pair of rainbow Crocs. Glass, 23, had just finished her shift as an electrician apprentice in a veterinary school building across the lot. She snaked conduits between electrical boxes and installed wall sockets in an operating room big enough for a horse. It was a full day of work she had enjoyed. It was also the kind of day she once worried would disappoint her parents and teachers. I was pretty brainy in high school, so everybody, I guess they expected more out of me, she said. I felt like if I didn't go to college, I would have been a failure. Glass is bubbly, curious, a lover of fantasy books, late-night workouts, and gummy bear-flavored lemonade. She graduated from high school in 2021 and went straight to Mississippi State University with the goal of becoming a youth therapist. But the road ahead seemed long and extraordinarily costly, and she began to question whether the investment would pay off. Her older brother had graduated from the same school with a degree in accounting. Afterward, he went to work as a truck driver. The cost of living is making people realize we don't have 4 years to sit around and just go to school, she said. Glass is among the members of Gen Z who are reckoning with the value of a college degree. Today's students have watched tuition climb over the course of their lifetimes. Lately, they have had front row seats to a brutal early career job market that is being further destabilized by the rise of artificial intelligence. Rather than despair, a growing number of young people have concluded that skilled trades like welding, plumbing, and construction might be a pragmatic way forward. Sure, AI can write an email, the thinking goes, but can it install a sink? How about solder a ball valve? The majority of high school graduates in the United States still head right to college, more than 60%, but trade school enrollment is ticking upward. The number of students at public 2-year schools that focus on vocational and trade programs grew by nearly 20% from 2020 to 2025, according to National Student Clearinghouse data. Apprenticeships and private trade schools have logged increases too. Yet members of this new generation of trade workers say they are encountering pushback of the "we just want what's best for you" variety from family members, school counselors, and friends. By choosing to pursue careers in the trades, they found themselves butting up against widespread perceptions that trade jobs were inferior to white-collar work, perceptions they were eager to change. Glass decided to leave college after a year. After a stint working at Jersey Mike's Subs, she signed up for a 4-year apprenticeship with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. She makes $21 an hour working while taking free classes to become a licensed member of her union. The average yearly pay for IBEW electricians is close to $90,000. Back at the job site, she waved goodbye to her co-workers, other 20-somethings in neon yellow t-shirts. She now believes that the people who look down on trade jobs are missing out. "I'm watching things grow from the ground up," she said. A 19-year-old is welding pipes that will transport yogurt through a dairy plant in Utah. A 21-year-old in Washington is swapping the tires of rally cars at pit stops. A 27-year-old attending barber school in Idaho is learning to use a feather razor and blending shears. In interviews, a dozen young people in the skilled trades said they had grown accustomed to the advice of guidance counselors and well-meaning aunts that they should go to college instead. But that message was hard to square with what they were seeing firsthand. They described older friends and siblings with college degrees who were struggling to find roles in the fields they had spent years studying. Many recalled watching AI seep into their classrooms and being warned that it would upend the labor force, although no one could really tell them when or what to do about it. Some students saw trade school as a way to be proactive in a rapidly changing employment landscape. To others, it was an opportunity for a generation used to carving its own path to once again defy conventional wisdom. Gen Zers had already rejected millennials' side parts. They didn't want their student loans either. As a high school student in Los Banos, California, Logan Bangert imagined himself trying out for the football team at Penn State. He was accepted, but balked at the cost of attendance for out-of-state students, more than $50,000 per year. I feel like a lot of people nowadays, they just go to college because their mom told them, Bangert, 18, said. His mother, a retail worker, just wanted him to do something he liked. At his senior year career fair, he saw a booth for a training program for a wind turbine technician at Universal Technical Institute in Rancho Cucamonga, California. The 7-month program cost around $21,000, which he paid for with the help of a state grant. He graduated in March. He now lives in Houston, where he makes $80,000 to $90,000 a year, repairing the blades of wind turbines. He sees the intense physicality of his job as an advantage in an era of AI disruption. A lot of people are scared for their jobs getting taken away by a robot and by artificial intelligence, he said. At least for the time being, he's not. Money is on all these young people's minds. Many found the upfront costs of college dizzying and were reluctant to take on loans that they feared they would be paying off for the rest of their lives. The average list price for a 4-year college education, nearly $200,000 at current rates of private school tuition, has roughly doubled over the past 3 decades. Trade schools seemed reasonable by comparison, students said, with many private options coming in at less than $25,000 in total. And industry groups and government agencies are increasingly offering scholarships and other incentives to make it more affordable. Students in short-term vocational programs are newly eligible for Pell Grants, a form of federal financial aid. To be sure, college degree remains one of the best ways to increase earnings potential in the long run. The median income of a worker with a bachelor's degree is 1.8 times that of one with only a high school diploma. There has been no watershed of people abandoning the 4-year institutions, and nor should there be, said Jerome Grant, the chief executive of Universal Technical Institute, a private vocational school with over a dozen campuses offering skilled trade programs. Instead, he argued that the school's programs were especially valuable for students who were not college-bound to begin with, and who may have wound up working lower-wage jobs like driving for Uber. He sees young people rejecting the idea that trades are somewhat subordinate to a 4-year education. Their parents can be a different story. We're trying to get them proud to say, "My kid's a welder," at a cocktail party, he said. Ryan Schickman lay on the floor of an attic on Staten Island, wrestling what looked like miles of flexible ducts into submission. Schickman, a 21-year-old HVAC technician, was on day 3 of a 4-day job replacing a heating and cooling system. He alternated sips of iced coffee and blue Gatorade. Both of Schickman's parents have undergraduate degrees. His mother is a physician assistant, and his father is an accountant. In high school, all my counselors were talking about college this and college that, he said. Family members urged him to study business or finance. Schickman shadowed an HVAC technician for a few summers in high school and enjoyed the job's mix of plumbing, welding, and electrical work. When he signed up for a 1-year program at Eastwick College, a private vocational school in New Jersey, his girlfriend at the time asked him not to tell her parents that he was going to trade school, he said. Across the attic, his colleague Eddie Farquharji, 25, said he had run up against similar attitudes. Back in the day, parents would be like, "All right, you're either going to college or you're a loser," he said. I think kids are much more open-minded than they were 30 or 40 years ago. They're looking at all their options. In a report published last year by Jobber, a software company for small businesses, 71% of Gen Z respondents said that vocational school carried more stigma than college. Only 7% of parents of Gen Zers said they would prefer it if their child pursued a trade or vocational program. Popular culture tends to depict tradespeople in a way that do not emphasize their intellect, said Shania Byrne, a chief operations officer of Bring Back the Trades, a nonprofit that provides scholarships and hosts skills expos for students. She noted the stereotype of a plumber with sagging pants or images of auto mechanics covered in grease. But stigma is deterring young people from fields that will need workers in the coming years, she said. Research from her organization has projected that 1.4 million trade jobs will go unfilled by 2030 as a result of a wave of retirements and rising infrastructure demands. Schickman has become an evangelist for careers in the trades on TikTok and Instagram, where he posts videos to an account called Trades Over College. POV: AI can't replace HVAC, reads text over a recent video of him welding a copper pipe to a compressor. His parents came around after seeing that he was making good money doing a job he enjoys, he said. Since starting his own HVAC business in 2024, he said he was making over $100,000 a year. He is a transparent person that he believes in work and challenges. Temperatures in workspaces can creep above 100 degrees, and he and Farah Kraji regularly haul 200-pound units up several flights of stairs. There are days I wake up and I feel like I'm 70 years old, he said. Both men wonder just how long their bodies will be able to keep up. In the long term, they hope to transition to starting real estate businesses or maybe something similar. Schickman eventually wants to spend more time on management and less time doing manual labor. Women and people of color who have historically made up a minority of the skilled technical workforce can face additional challenges. Glass, the electrician apprentice, said she is usually the only black woman on her job site. She said that she and another female co-worker had dealt with disparaging comments from an older journeyman who seems to have a problem with women terminating wires. Alondra Pantalon said her parents were initially iffy when she told them that she intended to enroll in a welding program at the Universal Technical Institute's campus in Bloomfield, New Jersey. They felt it was mostly a man's job, Pantalon, 20, said. She pushed back by showing them videos of women welding that she had found on social media. Pantalon said she knew her parents, who work at a pizzeria and a grocery store, had been coming from a place of love. They didn't want me to go toward the same path that they are in, start working and get paid minimum wage, she said. They want me to have a better life. She feels like she is on her way to one. Lately, she has been browsing automotive welding jobs that pay more than $25 an hour. Her parents are proud that she is set to graduate this month. That's good news for her younger brother, a high school student, who is planning on attending trade school too. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times Style section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Blue MAGA has entered the chat. It's a term that can mean whatever the people using it want it to mean, but it's not a compliment. By Alexander Nazarian. The insult, and it's most definitely an insult, is jarringly counterintuitive. It conflates the Democrats' team color with President Trump's Make America Great Again slogan in all its blazing glory. Blue MAGA is a call-out increasingly used online by young progressives who reflect what pollsters find is Gen Z's broader lack of faith in traditional party politics. Older liberals who fail to grasp the urgency of the moment are, in the young progressives' view, nearly as dangerous as Trump and his supporters. And it was enjoyable for the extremely online left to watch their elders react with displeasure to the rise of candidates associated with the Democratic Socialists of America. Or, as the influential progressive streamer Hassan Piker put it in May, Blue MAGA is crying a lot lately. He uses the term to describe what he sees as illogical devotion to a party establishment. Blue MAGA is about cult-like loyalty to the Democratic Party, but unlike MAGA, it isn't centered around one person, Piker said via text message. It's centered around the image of a party that consultants and lobbyists have carefully curated. It's not an apples to apples comparison, as progressives freely acknowledge, but it's close enough, especially since social media rewards labels with fuzzy borders that are easy to apply. MAGA leaves the power in the hands of Donald Trump, Piker said. Blue MAGA leaves the power in the hands of a neoliberal Democratic Party that tells them better things aren't possible. That feeling of hostility toward the far left from the moderate Democrats engendered an equally strong with friends like these backlash. If you do dare validly critique a Democrat, you are a traitor to the cause instead of a constituent acting out of valid concern, Michael Kocher, a progressive content creator, wrote in an email. In one video posted to TikTok, where he has 236,000 followers, Kocher mocks Representative Hakeem Jeffries as being on life support after 3 anti-establishment far-left candidates won primary contests in New York. A spokeswoman for Jeffries did not offer comment for this article. On social media last month, he congratulated the progressive candidates who won in New York City, depicting their common enemy as far-right extremism. Blue MAGA melts down, the Kocher video was titled. People who use Blue MAGA grasp that it is imprecise and inexact. They don't think that matters all that much. I think the term, just like so many online, has taken on a life of its own, said the content creator Will McCaffrey, who has about 220,000 followers on Instagram and TikTok. As with a lot of internet insults, the meaning kind of drifts to fit whatever insult we want to levy at that particular group at that time, McCaffrey added in an email. In this case, the group is just a vitriolic defenders of establishment Democrats and liberalism. It's not that they've adopted MAGA strategies into a blue ideology. It's that they are a MAGA ideology that has just put on a blue label. To the progressive podcaster, Jerome Ingram, Blue MAGA is the triumph of institutional loyalty over political imagination. Red versus blue, nothing else matters, just as long as Democrats win, he said when asked to define the term. Inherent in the insult is the conviction that the original MAGA has been a malevolent force in American politics. Liberals who wore knit pink pussy hats to the 2017 Women's March and attended No Kings rallies in 2025 would seem to agree. That they have been branded Blue MAGA by progressives appears to indicate that for some, their efforts have not been nearly enough. Among the furious and impatient is a progressive TikToker who writes and performs as Blakely. In a video last month, as moderate Democrats distanced themselves from some DSA candidates and their positions, Blakely criticized Blue MAGA as fascist collaborators. It turns out that people like being called Blue MAGA about as much as they like being branded a Karen. Democrats have always had to contend with a wing of the party that was not only far to the left of the Democratic mainstream, but also one that portrays itself as intellectually and morally superior than the rest of the Democratic voters, said John Cowan, who co-founded the moderate think tank Third Way. They tend to be young, highly educated, white, urban transplants who have no patience for any nuance or dissenting views. They have absolutely no clue how arrogant and condescending they sound, Cohen said, after viewing one of the TikTok clips bashing Blue MAGA. Max Rose, who represented Staten Island and a part of Brooklyn in Congress from 2019 to 2021, is a combat veteran and a vocal supporter of Israel. During his time on Capitol Hill, he regularly antagonized progressives. After the 2024 election, he considered running to lead the Democratic National Committee, a move some would call very Blue MAGA. Reached by phone this month, Rose said he welcomed an injection of youthful energy into the party ranks, but not if it devolved into an all the neighbors are watching fight. You can primary whoever you want, bro, Rose said, but fighting fellow Democrats instead of Republicans is, in his view, idiocy. On July 23, 2015, Trump arrived at the U.S.-Mexico border, debuting a hat emblazoned with his new campaign slogan, "Make America Great Again." Blue MAGA followed some 2 years later. There were scattered online references to the term in 2017, according to Know Your Meme, a site that tracks internet culture. But back then, usage remained relatively rare. During the 2020 Democratic primaries, some people on the left used the term to criticize supporters of more moderate candidates, specifically fans of Joe Biden. In the 2024 contest, Blue MAGA took on an edgier connotation. How could Democrats not see that Biden didn't have the stamina for a re-election contest? Progressives wondered. Were they as blind to their leaders' faults as the left thought the GOP was to theirs? You have this anger building at seeing the Democratic establishment try these more moderate candidates again and again and again and again, Andrew Flack, a Los Angeles-based commentator, said, describing how the left's frustration had grown over the last several years. The entire time the left is saying, "We need to be more progressive," he added. Some moderates have lobbed the Blue MAGA charge back at progressives, describing their far-left positions as analogous to what they see as the MAGA's own ideological excesses. The DSA and their radical allies are actually the ones enabling Red MAGA, Cowan of Third Way said, going on to characterize their views as calling for abolishing all prisons, police, and borders. In recent days, moderates have applied the label to supporters of Graham Plattner, the progressive Maine candidate who dropped his bid for the U.S. Senate after a rape allegation against him surfaced. Plattner has denied the allegation. Even before that, Plattner had faced questions about a tattoo that appeared to display Nazi imagery, as well as incendiary online postings. I have been shocked to watch my party embrace what I believe is Blue MAGA, Shannon Watts, an advocate for gun control, said on a podcast. She was describing her shock at the amount of hate and vitriol I have endured online, on X, because of my opposition to Graham Plattner. In 2025, Vanity Fair noted that Representative Ro Khanna, a Democrat of California, used the phrase as a lighthearted allusion to what the magazine called his kinder, gentler version of Trumpism. Khanna now rejects the term, however. "I wouldn't call myself Blue MAGA," he said in a text message. "I call myself Team America." Piker, the streamer, said that ultimately the phrase was more reflective of fissures in internet culture than real-life divisions. "I think we're just having a little bit of fun," he said. Modern love. The proper way to dump someone. Basically, just please don't do what was done to me. By Lucia Whalen. I have been on both sides of a dumping, dumper and dumpee. In my experience, neither is better, and death is preferable. While there is never a good time to dump someone, there is always a right way. Ideally, a dumping should be a carefully curated experience, a sacred act of dignity preservation that allows the dumpee to exit with grace. Begin by sending them an ominous yet straightforward text message. "I need to talk. Are you free to meet later?" Then meet on a bench in a neutral location. Avoid any location they enjoy. Most importantly, never blindside someone by dumping them on a regular date where it appears everything is fine. Because if the dumpee has no clue what is coming, they might do what I did, which is order a tuna melt. "I don't want to date anymore," he said after walking me out of the restaurant. I turned and stared at him, sure he was joking. I was carrying an overnight bag. I had traveled to his neighborhood and wasn't planning on going home. Ours had been a short but intense summer romance. He was not my usual type, but we clicked. I knew early on that we might not have been right for each other, but we were having fun, and I was willing to test out the theory that opposites attract, because he was a corporate lawyer, and I worked for a nonprofit. Also, he smoked, and I hate cigarettes. I believe in compromise, while he once canceled a first date because he found out the woman was gluten-free. But he was charismatic, cultured, funny, and openly expressed interest in me. In a world where dating can feel like such an endless slog of disappointment, the connection seemed promising. So when I heard the words, "I don't want to date anymore," my brain could not compute. Not only did he watch me order a tuna melt, he had encouraged me to order the tuna melt. "That sounds like the right move," he said, all while knowing he was about to dump me. To be fair, given his plan, he probably meant, "That sounds like the right move because we won't be sharing a bed tonight, so pursue whatever act of terrorism you want on your body." Many women order salads for the first 2 years of dating, but I felt genuinely comfortable with him. I was planning on seeing him 3 days later for my birthday. We had concert plans 2 months out. I felt tuna melt safe. Early on, while talking deal breakers with him, I brought up that I have a condition recently named polyendocrine metabolic ovarian syndrome, PMOS, and a doctor told me in my early 20s that conception would be unlikely. There is a lot of confusing information about the fertility potential of people with PMOS, formerly known as PCOS. While many people with it can get pregnant and have biological children, I don't know if I can or want to give birth, given my complicated reproductive and hormonal issues. I do, however, want a family, and adoption and fostering always felt like options. I told him the fertility stuff was a deal breaker for some men, and he said that he hadn't considered it before and would need to think about it. But as we both shoved it under the rug, the dates continued to get more intimate. "It's the kids thing," he said. "I've realized that I do definitely want them, so this won't work." "Wait, so you're talking specifically about biological kids?" I asked, trying to make sense of my new reality, where I was not actually on a date and was instead getting dumped because of the possible tumbleweeds in my ovaries. Suddenly, the weight of the dental night guard in my purse grew heavy on my shoulder. "Yeah, I hadn't really thought about it until you brought it up," he said, "but I want to keep that option open. I was stressing about it all week." I told him I felt blindsided, and he said, "Should I not have taken you to dinner? What did you think about the pancake?" Oh, did I forget to mention the pancake? At the end of dinner, he requested a dessert menu, and I said I don't need any dessert. "Let's get a pancake," he said. "No thanks, I'm good on a pancake," I said. He proceeded to order a pancake with vanilla ice cream. When our server set the pancake down in front of me, I quickly picked the plate up and placed it in front of him, announcing, "This is not my pancake." An older couple next to us started laughing at the young lovers quibbling. "Come on, help me eat the pancake," he said, probably annoyed that I was now bringing public attention to his bizarre, non-consensual dessert order. I took one bite. I was getting dumped because of my fertility issues after eating a hot fish sandwich and a child's birthday breakfast in front of my executioner. I felt insane. I asked if there was anything besides the kid issue. I was desperate to give this guy a better out. The fertility excuse seemed too callous. Yes, having biological children is a valid deal breaker for some, but without discussion? I could handle him saying, I don't feel a romantic connection, or I met someone else, or I watched you eat a tuna melt like an hour ago. No, it's only kids, he said. I love spending time with you. You're a golden person. I want to keep going out, but we would just keep developing feelings, and this would come up eventually. I'm getting old, and my friends are starting to have kids. Suddenly, we were standing outside his apartment building. A feeling in my gut immediately said, go home. But a lot was happening in my gut, so it was hard to decipher. I told him I didn't know what to say, and I asked if he wanted to walk 2 blocks to the lake. In retrospect, suggesting we spend any more time together was a bizarre move on my part, but I think on some level, I was trying to curate a proper breakup for myself. When I was first diagnosed with PMOS, I felt a mix of grief and relief. I finally had an answer to my many years of non-existent periods. But the diagnosis made me feel like my body had made a major decision around my femininity without my consent. And in a society where many consider having biological children as the purest form of child rearing, my diagnosis brought with it a forced acceptance that I might be taking an alternate route through womanhood. For a long time, I openly joked about having fertility issues. It was some of my first good stand-up material, and I had always dated men who treated it more as a no worries, we'll deal with it when we deal with it type of issue. I had never felt like my reproductive potential might eclipse someone wanting me in their life. Motherhood has never been my core concern, but there's something about getting rejected out of the blue because of your body that feels like getting punched in both fallopian tubes. We sat down on the concrete overlooking Lake Michigan. I'm not trying to change your mind. I'm just trying to understand, I said. Hypothetically, if I had told you that I had fertility issues but was willing to do IVF, would you have felt differently? He looked out at the lake and said, Yeah, I think so. Oh, was all I could manage. And I mean, he added, I don't even know if I'm fertile. What? I turned to look at him. Like, I don't know if my sperm works, he said. I guess joking. I wanted to cry, but nothing came out. I will never try to convince someone to want me. So we parted ways with an awkward hug, and I walked 1 block before finally bursting into tears. A day after telling this story to everyone I know, I quickly formed a fortress of certainty around my psyche, knowing that I dodged a bullet. How someone dumps you reveals almost everything you need to know about them. And I'm better off not spending my life with someone who forces pancakes a la mode on me right before dealing a devastating blow. I should address one gaping hole in this story. Regardless of whether I knew I was getting dumped, I did order a tuna melt before what I expected to be a night of uninhibited sex. I have no defense. Please respect my family's privacy during this time. You have been listening to a reading of articles and features from the July 19th issue of the New York Times Style section. Your reader has been Laura. Thank you for listening.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have the USA Today. Following that at 2 o'clock is episode number 3 of More Than Enough by Anna Quinlan. Stay with us for these readings and more. You're listening to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, broadcasting daily readings 24 hours a day of newspapers, magazines, and books to area people who are blind or have a print disability, who are provided reading radios. Radio Readings broadcast signal is provided at no charge by WNED. Radio Reading Studios are at 1199 Harlem Road in Cheektowaga, between William and Clinton Streets. Radio Reading's website is nfradioreading.org. For more information on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, call us at 716-821-5555.
The Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service now presents